a lot's happened. What I'm going to try and do is put everything in context so you can get our sense of where we think we are in relation to the consultations and in relation to the planning appeal. I'd like to deal first of all with the planning appeal, which is so important and which came out on Thursday of last week. It's a week last Thursday. I know most of you will get what the outcome was, but there are a number of implications in it which are even more significant. What the inspector does is he reminds everyone that appeals like the one we have to be determined in accordance with the local plan. So the issue is which local plan. He then refers and reminds us of what's in the 2006 local plan, the so-called policy EC4, which, I'm quoting here, it recognises Manston Airport as an important regional hub and business location and notes that its proximity to business parks ensures a key role in the economic regeneration of the area. The local plan also records that the airport should play an important part in the economic regeneration, not just of Thanet, but of the whole of East Kent. He also goes on to say that policy EC4's approach is also consistent with the government's aviation policy framework, the APF. That recognises, amongst other things, that the aviation sector is a major contributor to the economy, facilitating trade and investment. The APF supports growth within a framework that maintains a balance between the benefits of aviation and its costs, particularly its contribution to climate change and noise on the other side of the balance. That sets the context. So we then move on to the issue of how this has occurred and why we are at the appeal. The inspector goes on to note that although the planning application was originally rejected, the applicants, Lothian and Shelf as they were then, appealed, and as you know this was the non-aviation use on 4 big buildings, that having refused the application, the local authority, in the light of the aviation report, decided to withdraw its opposition to the appeals. And I should remind you at this point that if that situation had remained, the appeals would have gone through by default. And there would have been no examination of what was going on with the old local plan and the draft new local plan. No examination at all. The appeals would have gone through by default. And yes, I would say in this context, the applause that you so kindly offered us, or the 3 cheers that Brian so kindly proposed, are deserved because, and you've heard me say this again, the final bills are now in. The £437,000 we spent to fight that appeal was some of the money that's been best spent for this area in a very long time indeed. The inspector then goes on in paragraph 22 of the report to note that there are issues as regards what's known in planning terms as a duty to cooperate. And he refers in a footnote to a submission made by Dover Council. What that means is that a duty to cooperate is different from a duty to consult. A duty to consult comes once the plan's been published. A duty to cooperate comes before you publish the plans. And what Dover has said, as some of you will know, is that there are serious flaws in the Thanet local plan in relation to housing, upon which Dover did not get any cooperation from Thanet. So he notes that very, very strongly in that particular paragraph. He then goes on to talk about the possibility of airport use resuming, and makes the point that Lothian Shelf are of the view that there is not a realistic prospect of the airport use recommencing, and that reliance is placed on the ADA Solutions report commissioned by the Council. Note in passing, the appellants, Lothian Shelf didn't spend any money on any such report. And he makes the point, which many of you will be familiar with, the ADA Solutions report makes it clear that it does not offer any opinion about the reasonableness or otherwise of River Oaks' plans for the airport. And again, it's worth making the point, it's one of the fallacies that's out there. We offered to make our business plan available to ADA for their scrutiny, but we required them to sign a non-disclosure agreement, and they refused. That is entirely normal in these circumstances. They could have seen that plan, but they declined to sign a non-disclosure agreement.
Can I just say something? Have a look at Appendix A of the ADA report, where they have an interview with River Oak. There is an awful lot of information that they were given and never made into the body of the report, including a figure of, I think, £300,000, which never made it into the body of the report.
And I mean, I can confirm that. Sitting next to me is our resident flower girl, who was also present at that meeting and probably did more talking than I did on the work that by that time had been done and on the information that was available in the public domain. So the inspector goes on to say that he finds that the evidence of the inquiry does not demonstrate, double negative here unfortunately, the evidence of the inquiry did not demonstrate that the likelihood of the airport reopening was so slim that the conflict with policy EC4 should be disregarded. So it's a convoluted way of saying there's no evidence before him which would allow him to disregard policy EC4, which is a very, very important building block in the arguments that he advanced. So we go on from there as he reaches his conclusions to say this. I consider policy EC4 continues to carry significant weight in the overall planning balance. I make no judgment on the merits or otherwise of River Oaks' plan or their future success. However, given the DCO application is currently being prepared, the possibility of the site being used as an airport in the future cannot be ruled out. This being so, and until a new policy framework exists at the airport, I see little justification for departure from adopted development plan policy which identifies the appeal site as falling within the airside development area. He then goes on in paragraph 51 to say this. I've taken into consideration the latest emerging local planning policy which proposes to redesignate the airport for mixed-use development. The consultation process has only recently occurred and the emerging plan is subject to various outstanding objections and its policies may change. I therefore find little weight can be given to the emerging policy. For us that is very significant because the implications are that a great deal more will have to happen for that policy to change, and we are talking months, if not years. You will also realise that that has serious implications for the Stoneham Park planning application, which, if it ever progresses, and it's been sitting there for 14 months now, can only be moved forward in the context of planning policy EC4, which forbids such development. So, there is a link here to what I'm going to tell you now. As you were rightly reminded, because the consultation period ends at midnight tonight. So we are beginning to get the consultation responses in. It's our job to analyse them and just to give you a feel for the work that lies before us, and also the fact that not much of this will be occurring in the public domain at this stage. We have to show that we have given the right weight of thought and consideration to each and every response that we get, ranging from the local residents in whatever street it may be in Ramsgate to the Environment Agency or the Ministry of Defence. Everything has to be considered and dealt with and responded to. The response is not in the form of a response to whoever made the submission. The response will be eventually in the form of our DCO application. So that is likely to take some time. There is a further point to this as well. We're obliged, if we can, to sign statements of common ground with the statutory consultees. So at its simplest, let's take the County Council as an example. If there are 10 issues that they've flagged up in their response, if we can reach agreement with them on 7 of those issues and put them into a statement of common ground, we can then say, okay, there are 3 issues on which we can't agree, we will put those before the inspector during the inspector's examination next year. That's basically how it works. Same with the Environment Agency, the Ministry of Defence and all the others. That's what will be happening in the coming weeks. So based on that, I am predicting now that our BCO application itself will probably be ready for submission by about the end of October. Not sure, but that's a prediction. Well, now, and although technically these are all our documents, we have to publish them at the same time when we produce our DCO application. However, on Thursday, we received Thanet's response. Now, just to give you some context here, we met the Thanet Cabinet on Tuesday of last week at 11 o'clock, a 2-hour meeting. We met the 6 members of their cabinet and a group of senior officers in a private meeting. We were allowed to minute the meeting, but there were no other elected members present and no members of the public present. We presented them with a 79-slide presentation. Dr. Dixon was present. She'll shake her head if I start exaggerating. And we took our full team there. 10, 11, I've lost track. 12. We took our full. There were more of us than there were of them. 2 hours. There were a few questions, but not many. At the end of and at the end of the 2 hours we left. That was Tuesday, so our engagement with them finished at 1 o'clock on Tuesday. On Thursday afternoon, we received this letter. You're also aware that there is a process for sending the responses in. You're all aware of that. Well, this was sent in the form of a letter addressed to George Yellow, to our solicitors. They didn't actually follow the correct procedure. And I will, well, I could read you the first paragraph. It says, principle and policy conflict. The proposed redevelopment of the Manston Airport site as a dedicated freight airport with additional uses would be directly contrary to the emerging local plan policy. It allocates the site for a mixed-use development with the capacity to deliver at least 2,500 new dwellings and 185,000 square metres of employment and leisure floor space.
So they didn't understand.
Well, someone much less kind than I was moved to say, was this written before the appeal came? That's the current position. I won't read you the rest of it. There isn't anything to read. So as far as we're concerned now, just to be clear, we'll be moving forward with dealing with the responses to the statutory consultation, which I have to say was an amazing experience. I mean, it really was. You know, we had a shade under 2,000 people attending all those events. We had regular presentations as well as some village events, all of which were packed out. It was really remarkable. I mean, I've forgotten the exact numbers, but 230 people came to Cliff's End, you know. It was just extraordinary. And at Minster, they were queuing out in the open because there was a dance class that hadn't finished. It was just amazing. we're also pleased so far with the quality of the responses that we've had from the statutory consultees. We're analysing the Environment Agency's response, but it would appear that they are acknowledging that it is an airport, which is a big start because it sits on top of an aquifer, you know. We've also had a preliminary response from the MOD, which we can deal with. Their concern, as some of you will know, is on the HRDF, the direction finder, which they're keen to ensure is able to continue in operation, which we will confirm, of course. So what I wanted then to go on to talk about a little bit is some of the other stuff that's out there that we dealt with in the consultations, and which I would just like to put the record straight. The first thing is that there is a story out there, which we encountered several times, that Infratil spent £100 million on the in investment. I have no idea where that story came from. But the point that was being made was, well, if Infratil spent £100 million and couldn't make it work, then what chance have you got? Well, the answer is they didn't spend £100 million. They did spend 17 or 17.5 million to buy it, which was far too much. They did incur losses, which would have been tax deductible, of course. And they did spend a certain amount on maintenance and on building a new equestrian centre, which we happen to know cost £500 million.
Wasn't that paid by the EU?
Well, we're not sure. It may well. And they also installed a new radar installation, which cost £5 million, of which I think £4.5 million was paid for by the owners of the London Array. So that's one myth that is easily dispelled. The other myth is that we can only make this airport work if we have night flights. That night flights are a crucial part of our business plan. And this is over and over. Now, my view is that this stems from things that may have been said by the previous airport management under Infratil, when for some reason they went out there to try and get carte blanche for night flights. I still don't know why they did it. But clearly some things were said during the course of that, which has given people this idea. For the record, night flights do not form part of our business plan. They are not a crucial part of our business plan. If there are no night flights, we will manage very nicely, thank you very much. And the only reason we want some flexibility is because we know from previous experience some inbound flights arrive late, there can be weather and other issues which result in postponements. There are sometimes emergency flights which need to leave or arrive at all sorts of strange hours. But apart from that, there is no requirement. And we did spend a great deal of time drawing people's attention to the model that we had produced as well as the plan, and showing just how many parking stands there were on the airfield, and just how many free daytime slots that there would be. As you know, we're eventually aiming for 19 parking stands, and we believe that during normal operating hours of 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., that will give us plenty of scope to achieve as much as 17,000 movements, which could take us to 300,000 or 400,000 tonnes of cargo. That's where we stand on that. It is a myth. And I think the final point to make is this. The idea that out there are freight operators who want nothing more than to arrive in the middle of the night is completely wrong. There is no evidence to support that. And you've heard me say this before, I think. The empirical evidence is at Frankfurt Airport, where the German Administrative Court imposed a nighttime curfew on Frankfurt 6 years ago now. And you know what? Frankfurt has accommodated all those flights during the daytime. Why? Because they have a fourth runway and they have plenty of slots. So, from our point of view, that's a myth that, it will keep coming back, and we're seeing it in some of the responses. I just wanted to say also something about our investment and our investors. we have made a declaration to Companies House as to who they are and the names and addresses of our directors. One of the investors and one of our Swiss directors, Nick Rothwell, came to the Ramsgate presentation at the end of June, which was potentially going to be the most difficult of all of them because of local issues. He made himself available to speak to everybody. A lot of people spoke to him, some people here spoke to him and met him. No secrets, no mystery. That's who they are. And he also confirmed to several people that we have the investment available to take this beyond the present stage, to compensating the present owners, and then to making the investment that's needed to take the airport to the next level. All that's done. The final myth, which again will not go away, is that there is an option still for Thanet to enter into a CPO arrangement with another third party, and that mysteriously a CPO is quicker than a DCO. And I saw this on another social media site, which shall be nameless, just a couple of days ago. Now, just to remind you of the process, because we know, because we went through it. The process requires the council, and this is not the cabinet, it's the whole council, to pass a resolution proposing the CPO. Before it can do that, it has to have entered into an indemnity agreement with a commercial partner, which is capable and has demonstrated to the council's satisfaction, if they can, that they've covered all the council's risks. Also, the council and its funder has to show that an approach has been made to the owner to purchase the site and that at a reasonable price, and that the owner has rejected that offer. And finally, before that can even go any further, they would have to explain the disconnect between a decision to go for a compulsory purchase order and their decision to de-zone the airport as an airport. Now, even if that is done, there is then a whole rigmarole process that you have to go through. There's a statement of reasons that has to be served on the owners. The owners have the right to object. The objections have to be served on the minister. The minister has to decide whether the objections are valid. If the minister decides that the objections are valid, and at this point, they would have to show that this is not a DCO. They would have to show that this is a much more modest proposal, which doesn't qualify as a DCO. Because if it was a DCO, it would be a criminal offence. So they would have to show that it wasn't a DCO, and why, and they would have to satisfy the minister that they could make it viable as a small airport, when it clearly isn't. And only if the minister was satisfied with that would the CPO process begin. And then, at that point, there is submissions and evidence and so on, and some of you will remember. That matter is finally dealt with, eventually, by a public inquiry. It's not the same procedure as for DCO. Well, how likely is that? I mean, there are so many obstacles to that process, it's hard to see how that could ever happen. But even if they overcame all those obstacles, it's difficult to see any of that happening in less than 2 or 3 years. But it's a myth that's out there. There is, among some people, a sense that Thanet have only got to pass a resolution and CPO will happen. It really is not like that at all. Okay, so one last point about the future and where we go from here. On Friday this week, the government published a document which I know Bo and his colleagues have had a chance to have a quick look at, called Beyond the Horizon, the Future of UK Aviation. As you know, we've been less than impressed in the past at the weighting that's been given to airfreight that most government documents this, and there will be an opportunity for members of the community to respond. Just very quickly, this is paragraph 5.6 of the report. The UK has a successful air freight sector which we rely upon to support our industries to move goods around the world and import them into the UK. In 2015, goods worth around 160 billion sterling were shipped by air between the UK and non-EU countries. Air was the only mode used where exports were greater than imports. This represented over 40% of the UK's non-EU trade by value and shows the importance of aviation to our global trade. Goods shipped by air freight tend to be of a high value, you've heard Sally say this often enough, such as pharmaceuticals, bespoke or high quality manufactured goods and fresh food. The UK has well-developed air freight connections which, when combined with good quality customs services and smart borders, ensures countries are better integrated. The UK, however, is currently only 13th on the Air Trade Facilitation Index and 22nd on the E-Freight Friendliness Index, both of which are measures compiled by the International Air Transport Association to measure the ease and efficiency of air freight processes across the world. That's a very important point. I think you've heard me made mention of that before. They've actually produced two very interesting charts, and we do, as a country, have to improve our act in the light of Brexit, certainly, but in any event. And they go on to say, companies that export goods and services contribute 60% of the UK's productivity growth. Aviation supports our manufacturing and service sectors by moving people travelling on business and high value and time-critical goods across the world. Aviation has a key role to play in achieving the government's ambitions to increase productivity and grow the economy. So, as a general statement of the role and importance of air freight, we're very pleased with that. We will, I think the closing date is the middle of October sometime. We will be making submissions, but the public generally is able to make submissions in response to that. And we regard it as an important step forward in the recognition that there is a gap in policy regarding air freight. I mean, there is a whole lot, of course, in there about passengers as well. So just finally, for us, what are we going to do in the next few days? We will be publishing the slide show that we gave to the 6 standing members on Tuesday. We'll do that on Monday or Tuesday, as soon as we can. There are 79 of them, some of which were written by Sally.
We'll probably run one a day.
Yeah, well, you've got to be careful because it's so big it can make a system crash.
Is that the same presentation you gave to Dover?
No, we gave Dover an abbreviated version because it was to their full council meeting, you see. There's lots of stuff in there about airspace and about the line that you on approach and the line on departure, the lines on departure both to the west and to the east. A lot of material in there about the work that's being done on airspace. And again, to complete the picture, so that they'll be published early next week. We also intend to publish our response to the Dover local plan consultation, which includes our response to the Thanet local plan consultation. We responded to the Thanet local plan consultation in a very lengthy document on the 17th of March this year. We've never published that because we had thought that by now Thanet would have published it themselves. As I'm sure you know, they haven't published anything. The opportunity came to us a second time when Dover's local plan went out to consultation. So what we've done is responded to that with some Dover-specific comments, all of which are favourable, really. But we've attached to it the response that we sent to Thanet, and we're going to publish that next week as well. Because what we're beginning to see as we move forward is that the planning context is almost as important as the aviation context. In a way, we would say it's now been simplified by the appeal for the reasons that you heard from me earlier, because basically EC4 continues in operation and will remain in operation for the foreseeable future, which is good for us. So we feel it's important that we set out to the public here exactly what the implications of that are. So that will be done early next week. And then we will, as soon as we can, we're going to publish a timetable for the DCO, or a revised timetable for the DCO. As I said earlier, we are expecting end of October, roughly, to be when the application is filed. The powers that be have 28 days in which to accept it for examination. There are some mechanisms that we're allowed to use to share draft information with them before it goes in. But on the assumption that it's accepted for examination this side of Christmas, it means that next year we will be in the process of, we'll be in the examination process. When we publish our slides, you'll see that, what that involves in much more detail. The significance of it is this. Unlike the old hit-and-miss CPO process, where there's an open-ended public inquiry which goes on and on and on until everything's been resolved, what happens with the DCO is the inspector, or our lawyer thinks there may be 2 or possibly even 3 inspectors, will be appointed to look at various issues. They will be given, it can be as much as 3 months to consider all the information that's before them. They will then hold a series of meetings down here, probably one big one, probably at the council offices, to discuss the issues for which public hearings will be required. And then a series of decisions will be made. Let's take a non-controversial one. Let's take the Environment Agency. The inspector could say, well, we see you've got a statement of common ground, you've agreed on most things, but there are some things you can't agree on. We want more written evidence on those points, and then we'll have a further hearing to resolve it. Or we just want the written evidence and we'll make the decision. That's up to them. And that would apply to many other issues as well. So that our guess is that there will be a series of local hearings. Now, these are not old-style theatrical performances with lawyers on both sides. This is an inspector, maybe 2 inspectors, sitting in a room with an agenda, speaking to interested parties who've been called to make a point, if it's felt that a personal appearance is necessary. So that process can take up to 6 months. At the end of that process, the inspector or inspectors go away and write their report. They've got 3 months in which to do that. Having written their report, they send that to the Secretary of State, who has another 3 months in which to make a decision. And 2 final points. Included in that process are things like the Section 106 agreement. So operating hours, night flights, quota count, noisy aircraft, recording air quality, truck movements, all those will be in the Section 106 agreement, upon which Thanet's input will be required, but there will be consultees, as will Canterbury and Dover. There is no real difference in this context between the 3 districts. So will KCC be a consultee. They will be asked to provide information and guidance, but the inspector's decision will be final. So, at the end of the process, which of course will include a request for a compulsory purchase order in our favour for all the land inside the red line, at the end of that process, the DCO will come at the end of next year, which will give us all the land we want, contain conditions, some of which we may not like, but they will be conditions that we have to comply with, and will transfer the land to us. And that's, I guess you could say, that's when the real work starts. But then we will know where we are. So that's our current forecast of where we intend to be. We will publish that a little bit later this year when we've got a clearer idea. of where this is all going. And again, just to say, every time I come to one of these events, I think there won't be as many people this time. There won't be as many people this time. They're all getting a bit bored of the same old story, and then, you all amaze us and start giving us flowers. So we'll come back there. So just thank you, and we're all